In the United States, the Supreme Court stands as the highest authority in the judicial system, holding the ultimate power to interpret the nation's laws and the Constitution itself. Its role is not just to resolve disputes, but to clarify the meaning of the Constitution for all Americans, shaping the legal landscape for generations to come. The justices of the Supreme Court are tasked with interpreting complex legal questions, often involving fundamental rights and freedoms. Their decisions can overturn long-standing precedents or establish new legal standards that affect every citizen. Through its landmark rulings, the court has played a pivotal role in defining the rights and responsibilities of individuals and government alike, leaving a lasting impact on American society. Among the most fiercely debated constitutional provisions is the Second Amendment, which grants the right to bear arms. This amendment has sparked passionate arguments for centuries, as Americans continue to debate its true meaning and the extent of its protections. Across the country, people from all walks of life engage in discussions about gun ownership, public safety, and the boundaries of government regulation. These debates are not just legal, they are deeply personal, touching on issues of tradition, security, and individual liberty. At the heart of these debates is the challenge of balancing the rights of individuals to protect themselves with the need to ensure public safety. This balance becomes especially critical in situations involving law enforcement, where split-second decisions can have life-altering consequences. When police officers use force, courts are often called upon to determine whether their actions were justified under the law. These cases can be highly complex, requiring careful consideration of both constitutional rights and the realities faced by law enforcement. In a recent and significant case, the Supreme Court delivered a unanimous decision in Barnes v. Felix. This ruling has fundamentally changed the way courts evaluate police use of force, setting a new precedent for future cases. The central question in Barnes v. Felix was whether courts should focus solely on the exact moment force was used, or if they should consider the entire sequence of events leading up to that moment. This distinction is crucial, as it affects how accountability and justification are determined in police encounters. In this script, we'll take a closer look at the background of the case, the legal standards that existed before, and the new approach established by the Supreme Court's decision. We'll also explore what this means for law enforcement, the courts, and the rights of individuals moving forward. By understanding this landmark decision, we gain insight into how the law seeks to balance the power of the state with the rights of its citizens, and why this shift marks a significant moment in the ongoing conversation about police accountability and constitutional rights in America. Barnes v. Felix began with a routine Texas traffic stop in 2016. Ashton Barnes was pulled over but tried to drive away. Officer Christopher Felix fired at the moving car, injuring Barnes. This incident sparked a legal battle over whether Felix used excessive force. The Fifth Circuit Court sided with Felix, granting him qualified immunity by focusing only on the moment he fired. Barnes's lawyers argued that the officer's actions leading up to the shooting should matter. They claimed the court ignored crucial context and unfairly favored the police. The core dispute: should courts judge only the final moment or the entire encounter? The Supreme Court agreed to clarify the rule for all courts. The justices weren't deciding guilt or innocence, but which legal standard should apply. Their decision would resolve inconsistent outcomes across the country. The Barnes case brought to light a fundamental debate in American law enforcement. How should courts judge the actions of police officers who use force? At the heart of the case were two competing standards, each with its own vision of justice and public safety. The first, known as the moment of threat rule, asks courts to focus solely on the split second when force is used, almost like freezing a movie at a single critical frame. This approach insists that only what the officer knew and perceived at that exact instant should matter. Under this rule, the question is simple: would a reasonable officer standing in those shoes have believed there was a threat? It's a standard designed to reflect the reality of high-pressure, rapidly evolving situations that officers often face. The second standard, called the totality of the circumstances, takes a much broader view. Instead of isolating a single moment, it considers the entire sequence of events leading up to and following the use of force. This approach allows courts to examine not just the officer's split-second decision, but also the actions and choices of both the officer and the suspect throughout the encounter. It asks whether the situation as a whole justified the use of force. Supporters of the narrow moment of threat rule argue that it shields officers from being unfairly judged with the benefit of hindsight. They say it's essential for officers to make quick decisions without fear of later second-guessing. On the other hand, advocates for the broader totality standard believe it's necessary for true accountability. They argue that only by looking at the full context can courts ensure that justice is served and that officers are held responsible when force is excessive. This split between the two standards led to a patchwork of legal outcomes across the country. In some regions, cases were dismissed early, in others they went to trial depending on which rule the courts followed. The Supreme Court now faced a pivotal decision: to choose one uniform rule for the entire nation, and in doing so, to shape the future of police accountability and public trust. Their ruling would determine what evidence courts can consider in use-of-force cases, setting a precedent for every courtroom in America. Ultimately, this choice would decide whether cases involving police force are quickly dismissed or allowed to proceed to trial, impacting not just officers and suspects, but communities nationwide. Before Barnes v. Felix, many courts used the moment of threat standard. Judges focused only on the final seconds. Was there an immediate threat when force was used? Supporters said this protected officers making split-second decisions under pressure. Critics argued it ignored reckless police behavior that created danger in the first place. This narrow view could excuse officers who escalated situations, undermining public trust. The standard often led to unjust outcomes by ignoring the full context of police encounters. On May 15, 2025, the Supreme Court unanimously rejected the moment of threat standard. The justices ruled that courts must consider the entire context of a police encounter. Justice Kagan wrote that reasonableness requires understanding the whole story, not just the final moment. The court sent the case back to the lower court to reevaluate using this broader standard. Now, all events from the start of the encounter to the use of force must be considered. This decision unified the legal standard nationwide and ended regional inconsistencies. It was a victory for those seeking more accountability in police use-of-force cases. The ruling ensures courts take a comprehensive view of evidence in every case. The Supreme Court's ruling made the totality of the circumstances the national standard. Courts must now look at all facts and context, not just isolated moments. This approach, rooted in the 1989 Graham v. Connor case, was reaffirmed and clarified. Judges can now consider the officer's conduct, suspect's actions, seriousness of the crime, and use of de-escalation. Police training may shift toward better tactics and communication to avoid escalation. Courts must conduct thorough reviews, making early dismissals less likely. For the public, this ruling strengthens the ability to hold police accountable. The law now demands a balanced, context-rich evaluation of every use-of-force incident. The debate over legal standards reflects the tension between public safety and accountability. Supporters of the old rule feared officers would hesitate in dangerous situations, risking lives. They valued a clear rule that let police act decisively. Civil rights advocates argued the narrow rule let officers avoid responsibility for reckless conduct. They believe the broader standard encourages better policing and more responsible decisions. Reviewing the whole encounter promotes de-escalation and reduces unnecessary violence. The new standard aims for fairer outcomes and greater trust between police and communities. It's about ensuring both safety and justice in every police encounter. The Supreme Court's unanimous decision in Barnes v. Felix marks a pivotal turning point in the ongoing conversation about police accountability and civil rights. This landmark case has set a new precedent, signaling a shift in how the justice system will approach allegations of excessive force by law enforcement officers. By requiring courts to consider the full context of each encounter, the ruling fundamentally changes how use-of-force cases are judged. Instead of focusing on a single moment, judges and juries must now look at the entire sequence of events, from the initial contact to the final outcome. This broader perspective aims to ensure that justice is served more fairly and transparently. Police departments across the country will need to place greater emphasis on de-escalation techniques and strategic conduct throughout every interaction. Training programs are expected to evolve, with a renewed focus on communication, empathy, and minimizing the need for force whenever possible. Officers now understand that their entire interaction with the public, from the first words spoken to the final report, can be scrutinized in court. This heightened level of accountability encourages more thoughtful and measured responses in the field. As a result, more cases may proceed to trial, giving individuals the opportunity to present the complete story behind each incident. This comprehensive approach allows for a fuller understanding of the circumstances, motivations, and actions of everyone involved. The decision empowers the public, offering new avenues for justice and aiming to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Open dialogue and collaboration are now more important than ever. While the Second Amendment remains unchanged, the legal framework for police use of force is fundamentally altered. This ruling clarifies the boundaries of lawful conduct and reinforces the importance of constitutional rights. The Supreme Court's decision affirms that the law must look at the whole story, not just a single moment in time. This holistic approach is designed to promote fairness and accountability at every level of the justice system. Lower courts across the nation will now apply this new standard to both new and existing cases, potentially reshaping outcomes and setting new legal benchmarks for years to come. This new chapter in American law promises a more comprehensive, transparent, and accountable system for judging police actions, one that seeks to balance the needs of public safety with the fundamental rights of every citizen.